Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. I guess I'd like to call to order, I guess this is a committee of the whole meeting, but the committee of the whole for the budget meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores. Just, I guess the first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so. Do so now, or if it arises on the agenda. Nothing. So, this is, I guess we start this budget process, as again, it's each year we do this, and I know that staff put a great deal of time and effort into it, trying to address some of the community, all of the community's needs and all the wishes of council, and we come together with hopefully get a document that everyone's happy with. But I know we'll go through it and make some selections and then come out in the end, but I know each year it is always a learning experience for me, especially for because we understand what really gives you a better understanding of what we do as a town, all the services we provide and the capital projects that will follow this. So I'm not going to go on a lot much more. I know our CAO is going to lead the discussion today on the budget, and he has a few things he'd like to say before we start. So go ahead, David.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Smith, members of council, thank you very much for the opportunity today to present our first draft of the 2018 operating budget. In fact, in retrospect, it's probably our 10th draft, but it's the first draft that you're seeing. I wanted to thank and acknowledge staff for all of the effort that they've put in through a thoughtful, collaborative, full of consideration process. It is a culmination for us, and we're looking forward to getting council's feedback on what we're recommending. So I would like to thank our department heads specifically for that, but I also wanted to identify our finance team, represented today by Christy Hansford, for all of the work that they do on a regular basis to keep our economic engine going and keep an extraordinary year. Lots of turnover and lots of challenges, but they've come through with their typical professional competence. Again, once again, I'd like to acknowledge our clerk, Linda, for getting us over the finish line or to the finish line. We have great skill at getting to the 2-yard line, and Linda comes through and gets us across the end zone. So thank you very much for that. I would also like to identify in our office, in our audience, we have our new treasurer, Sue Murray. Today is her second day, so she's assured me that she can answer all of the questions with a great deal of. Yes, that's true. But you may sense a little bit today, and there's a couple of things that I'll identify that when we transition from one treasurer to the next, people have different ways of doing things, and they're all right. So not as a result of Sue coming yesterday, but there are a couple of slides that we've made some adjustments that you'll see as we go that we feel provide a little bit more clarity for council and public. So we'll identify those. There's not many, and they don't impact the overall end result. It's just a little bit more clear for the layperson, such as myself, to I'd also like to ask Chief Rivet to introduce his guest today.
Sure. And Chief Mike Belay from Stratford's in the audience here. He's 6 inches taller than I am. He's here on his last 2 weeks. Right now he's on holidays from Stratford, and he doesn't start until the 1st. His swearing in is on Friday, December the 1st, so you're all welcome to attend. And so right now he's putting in his personal time trying to catch up on some of the things that I can pass on to him in the meantime. Welcome him. He's a good guy.
Thank you. Our approach, Mr. Mayor and members of council, this year is to build a budget that's fair, reasonable, affordable, and meets the evolving goals over time. We have included, and you'll see that in our presentation and the information that we've sent you, we have included new items, and we built them right into the budget, but we've clearly identified them as such. So council should have a comfort level of from the beginning of knowing where we could end. And the analogy I was thinking about is you don't want to go in buying a $5,000 car and coming out as $25,000 because, of course, you need tires and a steering wheel. So what we've done is things that we feel are fair, reasonable. We've got feedback in. We've built them into the budget, so council knows right from the beginning where a reasonable end spot is. Having said that, they are identified. You will have the opportunity to speak about them. You'll have the opportunity to say yay or nay, and if you say nay, then they're easily peeled out of the budget. Sometimes there's a risk that first past the post, so all of the first requests get approved, and then at the end of the day, you're realizing that you've tapped out all of your available resources. So we have taken that approach, and hopefully you find that's reasonable. You always have the ability, as I mentioned, to remove those items, and they will be presented separately at the end, separately, and I would say collectively, so that you can look at all of the new requests that we've identified as such and compare contrast. We've also got a few staff-driven items that we did not include in the overall budget, so they would be additions to. They're clearly identified as well, and as we go through the process, you'll see them. And then there are some requests from members of council. There are not very many. We received quite a few, and through our efforts of working with those elected officials and having some dialogue and adjusting some things, we've been able to their satisfaction, I believe. So those are my opening comments, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, I will be facilitating a lot of the day, which is not typical, but with our treasurer on day 2.
Thank you, David. So, if does anybody just want to approve this as it is now and we can get out of here? I always got to try that. I guess not. So I guess we'll start with the 2018 operating presentation. The first is a review of the expense tally sheet. So, David?
Yes, actually, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to take, there is an opening presentation that I'm going to take members of council through, and it will end with the tally sheet. So members of council should have received this presentation email. It is up on the screen, so I'll start that. So the overview of our budget is I covered some of it in the opening statement, is management's best estimate of the operating, and today we are speaking only about operating, our operating budget to maintain our current operations. There have been some minor enhancements added. There has been effort into recalibrating some of the budget lines to better reflect actuals. So I know we did get a couple of questions from members of council. I think it was on insurance or utilities, and overall we've gone up, but we've rejigged things around based on actuals. So hopefully it's more reflective of what our actual spends are. And there have been some service level enhancements that have been built into the budget, as I mentioned earlier, and they are identified in a separate section, and you'll have the opportunity to comment on those collectively. The goals of today are to present a reasonable and thoughtful budget request. Similar to last year, we want to start with something that we feel is reasonable and affordable and meets goals. We're not presenting a budget where we expect or anticipate council feels the need to cut and reduce to get to something reasonable. Today we'll give you an overview. We'll demonstrate good value for taxpayer money. We'll answer the questions that you have. Again, with the transition of our treasurer, we may not be able to answer the questions in as much detail that you normally expect, but we will do our best, and certainly we'll follow up with any other questions you will have. We'd like to receive some direction from council to inform the final budget, which will come back to council for approval early in 2018. You'll know that our capital budget presentation, so this is operating today, capital budget happens in December. So on this slide, I mentioned there are some changes. This is one of them, and I think there may be another one. We've actually changed the operating levy increase to $325,000. It does not change any of the numbers, so the other numbers stay the same. And this is tomato, how to present it, how not to present it. The additional $100,000 was captured in another area of budget, and I won't go into a lot of detail except to say that some of it was money that we have already realized, and $100,000 was money that we have not realized but will realize. What we've elected to do is put it all together so it's clear, it's understandable, but it doesn't change any of the bottom line information. So our proposed levy increase, so the amount of money more that we need to operate the town next year is $325,000. We're in a fortunate position that we have growth, and that growth is about $300,000, and I'll talk more about that. And that's been offset to balance out the total proposed increase. So when you balance those out, it's about I believe it's about $25,000, and that reflects the overall tax increase on an average household of $4.61. So if you approved our operating budget as presented, the tax increase on the average household would be about $4.61, and that represents about a 0.36% operating budget. So again, that top line doesn't change the end line. It just makes it clear. It's more transparent. It's easily. So some of the risks and assumptions that we made. So our assessment, and my thanks to our building staff and development staff, we're anticipating about a $60 million growth in Saugeen Shores this year, which is incredible growth due to all sorts of things, but primarily because we're a community that people want to live in, and we're a community that businesses want to come to. And when you've got those two things, you're well positioned, and that certainly aligns with our strategic plan goal of appropriate growth. For your context, about $125,000 increase is a 1% adjustment to the operating levy. And what we've done in terms of assumptions is we've worked with our utility companies, and utilities is a big spend for us. We've, on average, we have a 9% increase in utilities, and that's based on information that we've received. Some other pressures that we've incorporated into the budget, Mr. Mayor, members of council, is our full-time salary and wage benefits are going up about $200,000. We are not adding new staff. That's is responsive to steps for our staff and other benefit increases. We have a very significantly, there's a $90,000 impact for the provincial government's decision to implement a minimum wage. And we've gone through and calculated out how best to implement that in Saugeen Shores, and it's a significant, it's 0.8 or 0.75% of a tax increase just on that specific item. Council has not seen, and you do need to see and approve the new wage structure. So we put this $90,000 in. We think it's a good placeholder. It's accurate. It's based on human resources and others' expertise. But you will have the opportunity to approve the new wage structure for our part-time staff. And we have significant number of part-time staff, and the minimum wage has a pretty significant impact on our operating budget. We have included an economic adjustment in our proposed budget. It aligns with what council approved for our unionized staff. I mentioned that 9% for energy costs. It's estimated about $75,000. So again, we spend lots on energy, and increasing energy costs impacts us. As you know, we talked last time through our LED streetlight conversion. A lot of our costs in energy are not how much you use, it's the delivery model. So our cost avoidance and your foresight in investing in LED lighting is a significant cost avoidance for us. Our smart, there's a $9,000 approximately per agreement. And I'll just note, I am using some liberal, instead of saying $8,857, I'm saying about $9,000. So hopefully you'll feel comfortable with that. And in our budget, we have included, they are a decision for you later in the day, converting 2 long-time contract positions to full-time. The costs are reasonably minimal. They're positions that have worked for a number of years at close to or full-time status, and it's good organizational practice to make those positions full-time, and it's good human practice, quite frankly. We haven't included any other staffing increases in the budget, so there's no new staff that we haven't ramped up or increased in other areas. This is a slide that just breaks down the operating expenses, and it shows that we are a service business. We're not manufacturing where most of our money goes into raw material or resources or something. So we are a service. We have staff, talented, competent staff that serve the public, and that's reflected in the percentage of our budget that is dedicated to invested in salaries and benefits, about 48% of our budget. There was a question, Mr. Mayor, about how these compare to last year, and some of them we can do the comparison. Some of them we can't because we need to include the operating, the capital budget. But I can tell you on this slide, it's almost exactly the same. The difference would be from last year, the utilities insurance were at 10%, and our external transfers were at 3%. Other than that, it's the same last year. So we are a stable organization. It's not unusual for things to slowly evolve over time. In terms of wages and benefits, same thing, very close to last year. You can see that it's a pretty spread out pie. We have lots of different services and some minor adjustments from last year to this year, but generally it's consistent with how the town has operated for many years. Our revenue sources, same thing, very similar to last year. In fact, our reliance on tax levy has gone down. Last year, I believe we were at 49% of our revenue source was on tax levy, but so there has been some change there. Our user fees last year were at 34%, so we are shifting the model slowly to user fees and some other minor changes in that slide as well. We are a very enviable community in terms of tax rates, so this source is the BMA draft municipal study. It's 2017, so it has been updated. Council is familiar with this. I think the community is familiar with this. As we subscribe to the service, we submit our information, and we get this. And I'm very happy, and I'm sure our community is, to understand that in terms of relative tax comparisons for residential properties, Saugeen Shores is and continues to be in the low category. Now, these are listed alphabetically, but on the left-hand side in the yellow column, we're low. We're not low-mid, we're low. And that's, I think, an important message for our community in terms of value for their tax money that they're spending. Our relative taxes, so this again is from the BMA study. You can see some of the statistics there. And we have a much bigger study that we're happy to share with our elected officials. You can see that over time we've had minimal tax increases. In fact, it is a very slow and gradual, and we continue to be in the low category. I would say in this one we're kind of middle of the pack. So again, demonstrating a tremendous value for our residents and businesses. On the flip side, and this is positive as well, this is average estimated household income. You can see that Saugeen Shores is high. We're very high relative to many other communities, and this is a result of a number of factors. And of course, this is an average, and with averages, there's lots of very high, but we do have citizens that have low income and some with medium income. we need to always understand that the municipality's role is to serve all of our citizens, and although we enjoy very high average household incomes, there are members of our community, and I'll be continue to work with council and the senior management team to make sure that we have a safety net, I would describe. And we've started to do that with some of our fee subsidies for those citizens that aren't, don't see themselves on this chart. I'll just pause it there so someone can take a picture. Okay, yeah. So that's the end of that part of the presentation, Mr. Mayor. Our plan was to go through the next stages of our presentation. With your permission, we'll continue to do that. I just need to flip a couple of pages here. So the next item on our agenda is the revenue and expense tally sheet. We don't have a slide for the tally. Okay, no. Since we're in a friendly audience, I said to Christy, who's our financial expert, I said, okay, one of your jobs today, Christy, is to keep making eye contact with me. And if my eyes go like that, then we're going to use. So thank you, Christy, for continuing to do that. Our tally sheet we don't put up on the screen because there's no way to put it up. It's fairly detailed. It's really just a summary, though. We're not planning on reviewing the tally sheet. It gives members of council a snapshot. All of the areas will be discussed in detail as we progress through the day, and certainly at any point, members of council can ask a question. And I see.
Go ahead, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I just wanted to ask you, on one of the slides you had a number that was different. So can I assume that on the very first line it says tax levy? When you go across to the change, is that where that number becomes 325? Is that right? And does that change the percentage in the last column?
It would change the 1.98%, but not the 0.36%.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking at the tally sheet, there's the line there on OMPF funding, and just the OMPF numbers came out yesterday, but there weren't numbers for Saugeen Shores, and I just wonder at what point do we anticipate we're going to have a final number for Saugeen Shores? It seemed that more input was required from us in order to generate the OMPF numbers, and I just wondered, does staff have an idea of when we will make those inputs and when we might get an answer to firm up that number?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that issue was raised actually yesterday by our treasurer and our clerk. We haven't had a chance to regroup since yesterday. It is something that we will respond to very quickly. I'm going to continue on, Mr. Mayor. So we've included in the package just a summary of our reserves. We know that that's a question that comes up from members of council at a fairly regular basis, and we have committed to doing a reserve strategy and update our reserve policy. But we wanted to have it in there for your reference as well. Some members of council were asking about definitions for reserves, and we supplied that. So as we go through the day, if you're asking about reserves, you can flip back to that and see the balance. And if you're wondering the definition of a specific reserve, what it can be used for, you should have that reference documentation. A lot of times reserves come into play more in our capital budget, but it is there for reference if needed. So I'm going to continue, Mr. Mayor, but actually I'm going to turn this off, and if you can, and I can hear for a minute, please. going to continue. We're going to continue as we go through each of our sections. We've set it up. You've seen the presentation before. We've set it up with a brief summary of the department or service, some achievements and goals, the 2018 challenges, and then we'll flip through the service areas. Our intent is to allocate time as council wants, so we'll move fairly quickly through the sheets, and if you have questions, then just identify, and the mayor will stop us and we'll answer those questions. Some of them, many of them, there may not be any questions. So the first category is revenue, governance, corporate, and administration. So this is a combination of a number of areas. It includes our council portfolio, our clerk's portfolio, treasury, the CAO's office, and a smart transit. So it is a culmination of a number of things. In future and in retrospect, we may break that out a little bit smaller chunks. But we've had a very successful year in 2017 in these categories. Council will remember you approved a strategic plan, a very significant milestone for us. And as I mentioned earlier, it becomes part of our regular thought process. I talked about appropriate growth, and that's right out of our strategic plan. Our corporate communications plan was approved. Our economic development strategy is developed. It's in the works. Those of you that are on our economic development committee will know that. Lots of consultation. We're planning to bring it before council before the end of the year and get that approved. You can see some other achievements there. What's not included in the slide is, as I mentioned, the significant achievement of our finance team over the past year. Lots of transition in that team. They continue to demonstrate their professionalism and expertise and passion for serving the residents of Saugeen Shores, and we're very proud of that group in particular. And then also, to be acknowledged rightfully is our clerks team. There's a ton of effort that goes into keeping our business correct and leading us through and leading members of council through the proper administration of government, and that's a significant responsibility. And they work hard every single day doing that, and I wanted to acknowledge them. Finance, we're shifting over, hopefully all of you, but know that some haven't heard yet, is our e-water billing initiative. It is something that's pretty significant. We send out something like 6,000 bills every 2 months, and that costs a heck of a lot of money. I think it's about $12,000 every 2 months on sending out water bills. So we're shifting that over to e-billing, and we've got a couple thousand or maybe 1,500 people signed up for that already. Our goals in 2018, job one, municipal election. So we will be ready for that. That again is something that our clerks team manages. Attracting a major hotel to Saugeen Shores is a goal of ours for a variety of reasons. What we also want to do is our companies that have landed in town as a result of the nuclear initiative, we want them to not be guests. We want them to be lifelong residents. And we've hooked them, and now we need to land them and implement many of the plans that I've. Some of the challenges that we have, this particular group of people, is our technology is aging. So you will see in our capital budget some requests for replacing some of our IT infrastructure. We know that's an important investment. We also, and members of council will know this, there's an increasing service level expectations. They're increasing all the time. Residents are looking for more services and improved services and expansion of services. We are somewhat restricted by our facility and spaces that we currently have. I wrote this next one. Lots of good ideas, but we have limited resources and many priorities. And that's a difficult struggle when someone has a really good idea, but we don't have the we don't have the resources or we have other priorities that can be challenging. We are a competitive marketplace for economic development and tourism, and it's important that we recognize that tourists have a choice on where they go, and companies have a choice. We want to make sure that Saugeen Shores continues to be a leader of choice, and people are choosing to come here to visit, to live, to grow their family, to have their business, and hire here. And finally, the challenge in this group is organizational change is a long-term investment. So that's something, culture in an organization takes 5 years to evolve. So a long-term investment for us. I am going to go through the slides here, and this is most of the rest of our day will be going through slides similar, very similar to these slides, and we'll just keep moving ahead on them. Some of them we'll have comments on, some of them we won't. So if you have questions or comments, the mayor will stop me. But this is a summary of our tax revenue. You can see that we've adjusted the slide as previous mentioned, but it doesn't change the overall impact. This is basically a summary of all the slides that'll come along. The tax levy dollar increase is $325,000. There will be a percentage change, as mentioned by Christy. But I think the nuts and bolts of it is the dollar impact on the municipal increase for the average household for operating budget is about $4.61, and the percentage impact on the municipal increase is about 0.36%.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On that slide, supplemental taxation, 2016 actual 144,672. At what point, what time of the year, do we see a number plugged into the 2017 approved budget, which is zero now? Is that typically by year end?
So that's a number that we don't have an estimate for right now. That would come at year end.
It's year end?
Yeah.
And will that affect, once that number is received, will it at the end of the day affect the bottom line number? If it's, say, a positive number of $100,000, for example, what does that do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically we've transferred those amounts into reserves if we have a surplus at the end of the year, but it could affect the 2018 budget.
I'm moving on to the next slide. So for council, a minimal impact. Council has instructed staff to do a remuneration review, which we will do. The intent of that was to implement it post the 2018 election. So we have put some money aside. You'll see later to do a bit of a study, but also to fund any changes for the end of next year, the 2018 post-election impact. Other than that, it's been kept the same.
I actually lost where we are. I've discussed this with Linda, on our clerk, on a potential adjustment, and I forget what the answer was. If Linda can remind me, on in particular, if there was going to be, if this part of the study is going to look at what the expenses are related to attending an AMO conference every year while you're on council, it's clear to me that $2,000 is not sufficient. But if the expectation is that we should pay for the difference ourselves, then that's okay too. I just didn't know if this study was going to include a look at that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, certainly our discussion with respect to the review was going to include expenses by the council members. Our discussion was that there was really no change in the 2018 budget, so that you're seeing as we have seen in the past years. Moving forward, the review is to undertake the remuneration, the expenses, and any per diem rates.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in terms of that review, if you can answer this for me, will the review include some discussions, consideration around the reconfiguring of how council remuneration is handled? And what I'm referring to, there are some municipalities across the province of Ontario where there's a base rate council is paid, and then they're paid for so much per meeting that they attend. And it's not a bad system. I researched a little bit in some other communities how that works, and it can be quite efficient. Will that kind of information be considered as part of the study, Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The details of the review haven't been determined yet. I anticipate there'll be a staff report coming forward so that you'll actually know the basis of what the review will contain.
So the election service area, you will see that it's consistent with our thoughtful approach that $15,500 is contributed to a reserve every year, and every 4 years, Linda? Every 4 years we tap most of that out to finance the election. Recommended change to that, but you will see that there is an estimated balance of about $2,000 at the end of the year. So I think that the number is appropriate. The corporate non-departmental slide, so this is a service area. You can see that there has been some changes. As mentioned, there is a $5,000 review, $5,000 included for a compensation review for elected officials, and $1,000 to participate in the BMA study, which gives us all of the information that we use.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is no surprise to David or to the rest of the room. A very serious 24-hour power outage took place in the community. Took the power out to the Dr. Earl Health Center as well for close to that amount of time. And it strikes me that West Ontario would definitely incur some very large costs bringing in an extra team from Strathroy to help revitalize that area. And I'm sure that our fire, police, and engineering and public works departments incurred extra costs during that time as well. So my point is, that was one tree that came down and took that line out. There are 12 more trees on municipal property the size of that tree. They are huge, and they are over 100 years old, and many of them are at the end of their life cycle, and that can be proven by an arborist. So as each one of those trees comes down, we're going to have another extensive power outage that could or could not cause secondary accidents and injuries, and it's a major safety concern in my mind. What I'd like to know is if we can, I certainly wouldn't know if we could partnership with West Ontario Power. We're an owner of West Ontario Power. We get dividends from West Ontario Power. I'd like to know how we can look at taking those other 12 trees down in advance so that we don't wait for them to come down, and how we would finance that from either a transfer to reserves, allocate some of that money, or at least study it, ask our department heads that were involved in the incident to cost how much each of their departments. In essence, I would like to see a report, not only from West Ontario Power about what they think they should do, but I'd like to see a report from our staff saying what we should do, knowing that those trees are so big in that particular area that it can happen again, and they're leaning. They're already leaning. They're waiting for the next big wind to come down. So can we access this transfer to reserves money easily and put it to some good use based on the findings of a report?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that it's two separate issues, and I wouldn't suggest that we tie the two together. So this is income that we receive from Westario. We've lent the money in a nutshell, and this is the money we get from them. It goes into our overall revenues. We can choose to spend our revenues however we want. So I wouldn't directly connect those two dots. Having said that, Councillor, you have identified the issue. We have started, I think I mentioned to you, I met with Westario last week on this, among other things, and our staff have put it into our system to make sure that it gets addressed. I think we're doing the things that you've asked us to do. It's a great idea. It goes on the priority list with all of our other priorities, and hopefully in the near future you'll get a response. Actually, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say hopefully. That's not true. You will get a response.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just interested in a couple of things around interest. Line 7520, for example, maybe just some clarification as to that's interest income bank. Right now, at October 31st, that line stands at $85,746. The budget was to get to $185,000. It's a little late in the year to be at less than 50%. I suspect I'm just not understanding how that interest is flowing, so maybe I could get an explanation as to how that account works. And the other question I had related to interest is, where in the budget does the interest that we're earning on the reserve accounts and more than our interest, our investment income on the reserve accounts show up? We made some changes a year or so ago to how we're investing those accounts, and I just wanted to know how that's expressed in the budget.
For you, Mr. Mayor, the interest sitting in that 7520 account is currently just our bank interest. We do have some reconciliations to do on our investments, so I expect that will increase dramatically. As far as the interest on the reserve accounts, I would have to look into that a little bit further to get you more information.
Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you. A couple of times over the years I've asked about the donations that we make, and on this particular page there's a line that says grants and other external transfers, and there's a reduction from last year to this year from $60,550 down to $550, and the explanation has to do that we've finished our contributions to the hospital. However, how are we, and I assume some of them will show up in other departmental budgets, but I thought we were getting closer to putting values on some of the waivers and other contributions we make to outside groups and different events around town, because those are technically donations from the town. But I'm more curious to know the fact that this number is down to $550. What is the expectation for what that would be used for? Because it's it's a very low number in terms of having the ability to contribute. So if we had, say, another request like we had last year about an air show, this value doesn't cover much of a contribution. So can I just get a little more information? And I am suspecting that some of the donations show up in other departments too, but are we getting close to understanding in the bigger picture what the town contributes with a value attached to it, to events and groups around Saugeen Shores that don't show up as a line item? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The $550 isn't allocated to anything specifically. I think it was just we took the $60,000 out. There's $550, and we left that in case something comes along. To answer your question, yes, staff are throughout 2017. We've been compiling all of our donations and services in kind and things like that. Department heads are keeping track of that, and council will receive a year-end report which articulates that. And finally, as you mentioned, throughout today you'll see other We've identified other things that are donation-like. As an example, there's an investment in the trolley. So you will see those under departmental slides.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is also related to investment income. Is it possible to get a approximate total of what we have invested that we're collecting income from, dividends and?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have that available right now, but that is something that we could.
Administration. So, Mr. Mayor, members of Council, this is a slide that, again, compiles all of those service areas that I spoke with at the beginning. It does include a conversion of a long-time, part-time, permanent position to a full-time position. The details of that we'll talk about later. It's one of those sheets we've included in the budget, but you'll be able to review the details specifically and make a decision on that. And there has been a reduction in audit fees.
Thank you. I have two different areas to ask a question about. At last night's council meeting, we were talking about business licenses related to food trucks. I'm assuming that they probably fit into here maybe under the hawkers and peddlers license line, which is 7,200. But if not, where do they show up? And I guess the second part of that is, I noticed later on page 110 of our package, the facilities page actually has some lines in it related to license revenue as well. So I just was curious, is the expectation that the food truck is already in here, or where does it fit into the budget process? And I do have a second question too.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the food trucks do fit into the hawkers and peddlers license.
And my other question is, when you go down to, it's on page 19 of our package, there's a line that says 6,100 is close to the bottom of the list. Bank service charges, and you look across, it's less than $2,000. Later on in the report, in the community services section, there's reference to bank fees in two different places of $44,000. I don't see anything here that would pick up on bank fees that are associated with people paying with debit and credit cards and stuff. Am I just missing where it is on the list, or have we consolidated everything and it's just showing up in the community services budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there are lines in community services showing those bank charges, those would be for the credit card fees, for your debit fees, and they would also be captured in it for anything that goes through the front.
Just if you could just be so. Is the total amount then showing up as part of the community services budget? Because I just don't see anywhere here where there's a number that I would think would be reflective of how much it actually costs to collect money.
For you, Mr. Mayor, it would be captured in both places. So anything that would go through our front counter here would be more admin related, and those service fees would be captured in the administrative budget. Anything that goes through at the tourist camp or the harbor would be captured in the community service.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but where is it on this list? Because $44,000 in community services is substantial. I just don't see a number that's at all sort of related to that kind of value here. And I would assume that, it's a pretty big number for other charges too.
I would assume that it's lower because we don't allow people to pay by credit card for their water bills. That reduces a lot of our fees and admin. But I can look into that further.
The next slide is information technology. And again, I'm presenting these in lieu of a 24-hour experienced treasurer. So our information technology budget, as you can see, we rely very heavily on information technology. It's a good investment for us. We are increasing our computer maintenance. We are a very low-cost IT section. We have a staff person of one. And one of the other decision packages, decision items that you've got is updating our intranet. And that'll cost about $14,000. That's funded by Reserves Fund. That's a critical piece of our communication plan, our organizational plan, and it is a separate sheet later on in the package.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering about CityWorks, and note that the maintenance contract is in there. And to me, there's, in terms of what we have from CityWorks right now is not as much as maybe we should be aiming to have from CityWorks. I feel like I pretty well lived my whole life through one of these, and I think most people do, and we don't have that mobile module, at least as far as I know, for CityWorks. At least we didn't when I last looked into it a few months ago. So I wondered if any investigation has been given or any pricing put together to put together the whole CityWorks component and get that mobile functionality. I'm not saying I'd be interested to know the price and see if that was at all something we could achieve in the near term, or when we could achieve it.
I'll make a comment, and then I think Bart is signaling that he's got an answer to that. But I just wanted to comment on that. Is you're absolutely right, Deputy Mayor, that the mobile technology is critical going forward, and the platform that we've talked about in terms of our communication strategy will give council mobile access to things. Our intranet will give our staff mobile access to things. That's how people operate. So absolutely. And then I'll look to Bart to.
Amanda, have you?
Sure. We have the mobile. It's called Field. So when you click on, as a staff member, you can click on Office or Field. And when you click Field, it's CityWorks on your phone. So that's how our guys read and enter service requests and work orders. So the $26,000 licensing fee is for when the public and you guys call in for service requests, but it also enables that service request to turn into a work order, which tracks the time and the materials when the guys are out in the field.
And that's great news. And I guess maybe it isn't valuable. I don't know because I don't have it. But I would like the component that we have access to. I was unable to use the mobile end of it, and maybe you've looked at that and you felt that a member of council's having access to that piece to input those service requests is not something that is worth the money at this point. I don't know. I guess it was something that I was interested in, a way that I was interested in trying to use it. It's much more difficult for me on an ongoing basis to find a desktop to use it on. So maybe you have a comment on that, or you have looked at it, or well, let me know, I guess.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll take that under consideration. Certainly, as mentioned, life is evolving for everyone to the mobile technology. If we want citizens to be able to access CityWorks and put in a service request for something, we don't want them to have to go home and log in and that type of thing. So we'll report back on that. Moving on, animal control. There's no changes to animal control. This is an item that we have a service contract. It's been a service contract for a number of years. The prices have not changed. At some point in the future, we will reevaluate that and come to council for direction.
One question, Mr. Mayor, to you, to the CAO, and perhaps, it's about animal control, the servicing that's provided. I believe the group is out of Lone Sound, is that correct? And our bylaw enforcement officer, I think in the past the bylaw enforcement officer did respond to some animal like dogs off leash on beaches and so on and so forth. Does our bylaw, I know we're getting to that budget a little bit later in the day, but does the bylaw enforcement officer still respond to complaints from the general public about dogs off leashes on beaches, so on and so forth? You can answer that question for me.
I think yes. He doesn't have a mic, so. Wait, Councilor Grace?
Thank you. Under the total for animal control, our total right now, as of October 31st, is $921.81. Is that right? Is that what I've got under total animal control, the estimated budget is $89.60, but as of 2017, it says $921.81.
I suspect that's correct. It's just a difference between expenses and revenues.
Okay, so that's showing quite differently from 2016 to what the budget is estimated as being. Is that?
Yes, it is. I suspect.
Is that going to change by the end of the year, or do we still have to reconcile? Is that the?
I think Linda can speak to it, but I think these are guesstimates about how many dogs and how many days that they're going to be in a. Maybe you go ahead, but before I say something wrong.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure that I'm following the question. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely the billing cycle. We are close to the actual. We're close to the budget. There's no unusual circumstances in 2017 over 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two items. Recently in the newspaper, there was a story about a group that's now doing some work in Saugeen Shores associated with feral cats. It seemed to be something that was the intended geographic location was more in the rural areas. I believe that there's a bit of a feral cat problem within a couple of the neighborhoods in urban areas too. I just would like to just flag that at some point it would be interesting because animal control, we contract out a service, but we do have some issues with I'd call them nuisance animals in the community, skunks, raccoons, feral cats, and we don't ever seem to talk about how we address that, and even bears. And since Chief Rivet is here, the police get the bear calls. I think Linda in the clerk's office gets the calls about skunks and raccoons, and certainly there's a cost when we bring in somebody to deal with that. But certainly the feral cat issue, I think, is significant in a couple of locations, and I would appreciate if somehow we had at least a conversation within some area about perhaps a bit of a proactive response that maybe starts to nip the problem in the bud.
Municipal heritage, no change.
Hi, Stephanie R. Huber.
You'll see that certainly up till October the 31st, the number seems low for what's actually been spent. We do have 2 plaques that are now, the copies written, the photographs are in place, the design work's been done, they've gone off for production, so this number will go up now because we've actually submitted some things in that invoices will start to come to the town.
Moving on to strategic initiatives. So this is a new name for our service area that formerly was, I believe, economic development. You can see that we have consolidated through discussions with council 3 service areas within here: economic development, corporate communications, and organizational effectiveness. There is an increase in the training. But I just wanted to point out that training is actually for lots of staff. It's to bring in facilitators to help raise the bar in terms of our communications overall. We do have some media training scheduled coming up. So it's not a budget for a couple of people. It's a budget for our entire organization. And there is a decision package a little bit later related to strategic initiatives.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps this would be a great question for Jessica if she's still here. I just was curious, you've made a decision to split one line that was communications, and it's now become communications and promotional. If it's okay, if Jessica could maybe make a suggestion about what fits into both categories, because it's it's been a split of a dollar figure, and I just am curious to know what's communications, what's promotional.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly Vice Deputy Huber, I can explain that. So the communication budget, that line is strictly for tactics and leveraging communication through the corporate communication strategy. So that's more a strategic communication spending, so implementing new tactics and moving those initiatives forward. Whereas the promotional line is, for example, it could be additional economic development, so developing promotional pieces, and that may also include some of the Business to Bruce programs. So a little bit different, where the communication line is strategic communication and promotion may be more economic development.
Okay, we're moving to the promotion portfolio. We have included an increase of $4,000 for the Chamber of Commerce. I believe their budget is included. Joanne is not available to attend today. She's got some personal family emergency and has been called out of town. We also just wanted to identify in follow-up to some of the questions that the Vice Deputy Mayor had. We wanted to identify that the grants include $15,000 for the trolley operation and $5,000 for the trolley maintenance. And I think you're going to see a little bit later as well some other funding tied to the trolley as well.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, and I'm glad you isolated out comments about the trolley. At what point do we get a chance to say maybe there should be a little different business model here? Because certainly, it started off as I loved your comment up there. Good idea, limited resources, and priorities. You start to track a number of things through here, and they're related to tourism. They're related to a number of things, but I don't think we expected the trolley number to just every year the number just grow. And there is another place in fleet management, I think, related to the trolley. And what is that upper limit? Because we do have limited resources, and there's a lot of other initiatives that would be benefited by some funding. But I just would appreciate if at some point we received a little bit of a report very specifically about the trolley, so that we have an understanding of the value that is coming for our investment, because it has grown, and this expectation of more each year, we hadn't really anticipated that, I think, in the level that it's at. So I'll just leave it at that as a thought. And perhaps sometime, because Joanne said something about the trolley statistics aren't available yet in her report, so just would hope that we would get that, because it to me is wrong to just assume that we would just spend more every year without questioning the business model of the operation. Thank you.
Well, I think this is the discussion you have each year. This is the budget, and if you're not happy with that number, then if you want to cut money from the trolley or for any particular line, by all means, raise it now and see if you can get some support for it. I know the Chamber does each year come back to us with a report about their activities, and I suspect we can ask Joanne to include those numbers and even the budget for the trolley in that report. Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just along that same line, I have the pleasure of sitting on the Chamber Board of Directors as a council appointee along with Councillor Grace, and there was some discussion at that meeting about the trolley, and certainly 2017 there's been experience has been more maintenance than was expected on the trolley, and but the thought was from the people that maintained the trolley was that was a bit of a blip, that there was some issues came up, and I think they're getting the kinks worked out. This is the second year in operation, and certainly there's been some growing pains when you buy a used vehicle like that. You're going to experience those type of things, but it's expected that going forward the kinks are being worked out and that the expenses are going to come more in line with what was expected.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not certain there's anybody in this room who's going to be able to answer it, but I want to raise it as this question of Pumpkin Fest. Pumpkin Fest according to the Chamber's tourism budget, is going to contribute $10,000 to the $170,000 operating expenses of the tourism department. And as you'll all recall, just only a couple of months ago, Pumpkin Fest was here asking us for a $25,000 line to get them through potentially. Now I have a sensation they haven't drawn on that line because they're anticipating this, but I'm reading through Joanne's report, trying to read between the lines. I still am not real clear on the financial status of Pumpkin Fest. All I would say at this stage is we need to engage the Chamber of Commerce like ASAP on this point, so that so we're not in the situation again next September where we're up against it and having to offer a line or whatever to make sure the festival happens or survives. And I think we need clarity to, if our tourism budget's relying on $10,000 profit from Pumpkin Fest, I think we'd better see the financials of Pumpkin Fest, or at least somebody should. I'm not saying necessarily it needs to be presented in this place or to this council, but we need more clarity and more certainty around that, and we need the Chamber to work with us starting right now so that whatever's required to make the festival happen next October, we're well prepared for it and we have the chance to consider different alternatives. So I make that statement, I guess. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I just wanted to circle back briefly before I answer that on the trolley, and staff certainly had the same position. We came to the conclusion that it would be appropriate to support the trolley, not support the trolley, but we came to the conclusion that a 3-year window of getting up, getting operating, getting stable, getting ridership smoothed out is appropriate, and at that time we would do a review with the Chamber. Certainly if Council directs us to do that earlier than that, we'd be willing to do that. In terms of Pumpkin Fest, you're right, Deputy Mayor, I do not believe that they drew on that line of credit that they had requested. We can certainly continue to work with them. We do have 2 members of the board in the room, so I'm sure they'll take that message back.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, so for as long as I can remember, either inside council or outside council, that office and those people that work there and all the efforts they put in, we've always felt that there's always great value for money. However, Deputy Mayor Lucas pointed out that maybe we could ask staff to do that due diligence review with the Chamber operations. I would tend to think that we ought to reach out to other communities and look at other heavily banked tourism communities as well, and do some comparisons, because something tells me that I think we've been underselling our Chamber of Commerce for at least 10 years, that maybe we're just not in the real world here. We're not in the real picture. I'd be so outlandish to suggest maybe they should be, it should be bumped up $50,000 or $100,000 a year for the work they do, for what the return is. So I would ask that staff do that very thing and look around and work with their office and come back to us with some kind of future report in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll get, like I say, annually the Chamber does make a report to Council. I think that would be the time to make those, be a better time to focus on specifics of what you're looking for. Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And once again, I don't propose to speak on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, but like I said, I do have the pleasure of sitting on their board of directors, and I can say that they did not draw on the $10,000 line of credit that was requested, and they have, in fact, have no intention of doing so for next year at least. The report came back that the 2017 Pumpkin Fest was one of the most successful ever, whether it was because of the weather or the closing it into town or the Batman himself. We're not sure, but they had anybody who was there saw the great crowds, and it was a complete success. And I think at the end of the day, there was in the neighborhood of $40,000 profit made on that endeavor. So that certainly put them in good stead for going forward. But also just to follow up with your comments, Councillor Menage, the chamber is doing some internal searching, and they're seriously looking at doing some strategic initiatives to position themselves for the growth that the town is experiencing and where they want to be in 2, 5, and 10 years going out. So it's an interesting board to be on.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I want to just echo the sentiments that Councillor Menage said. Having been on the board before and going through what we did this summer with Canada's 150 and Pumpkin Fest and all the events, those events were put on and ran a lot by the Chamber of Commerce. The people that work in there put in incredible hours, and I know, looking at the budgets that they have submitted in the past, Joanne tries to keep it as streamlined as possible. And as Councillor Menage said it exactly, we actually should be adding a little bit to their budget. They operate on a shoestring budget, and for what they do for the town, it may not seem a lot, but if we could add anything in there at all, once we get some of these reports back, I believe we should be adding up and adding on to it.
Thank you.
So moving on, Mr. Mayor, the next service area is transit, which is our SMART organization. I believe there was a budget or a background information. I'm not planning on commenting on it.
Councillor Menage.
We have a representative, right? So, and I'm just curious as to why our fellow community south of us, Kincardine, has half the users that we do, and is there something that you can put your finger on it and say why? Is there a reason?
I guess we'd have to ask Kincardine, Councilman, as why we're not using as much. We discussed at the meeting, like in 2012, just a little bit of information, Mr. Mayor, but in 2012 our share was 7.39% of the usage for SMART, and this year it's 19.7%. So our contribution in 2012 was 27,000. This year it's 120. Just a little background information. So it's based on ridership, usership, of course. We have more and more. We tend to see a lot more rides heading over to the Owen Soundway, Councilor Menage, and those rides, the longer they get, becomes more expensive. Kincardine perhaps aren't making as many trips to the city as we are. We're half an hour away. They're an hour. So Kincardine tends to do a lot more local servicing within the community versus the longer trips. Longer trips are more expensive, and I guess we're victims of the success of the program. It's a good news, bad news story, I suppose, in that the costs have gone from 27,000 to 120,000, and all I can say is thank goodness for the provincial gas tax, which is $500,000, which helps finance this program, and without the provincial gas tax, we'd probably go from 120,000 to maybe well over $200,000. So hopefully that gas tax remains in place. But the best I can explain it, our ridership's up, and our trips are a little bit longer. So.
Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what the proportion of Concardant's population is senior either, but we do have a significantly high senior population, and that might be another factor that would affect our ridership level. I know several people who use this fairly regularly, mostly for local trips, but I think it's a great service that we provide. And you know, I wish we could do more for public transportation, but this is a great service.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Through you, another question perhaps for Councillor Myatt. Every time Roger comes here, I always get the impression that he works by himself, but then you start adding all the numbers up for office, and it's over $250,000. How many people actually work in the smart office? Do you know?
Well, they're just that I've met just one, and Roger, so two, and of course you got all your wages for your drivers as well, and part of the compensation, the whole compensation package was reviewed this past year as well, and wages with the minimum wage increase, what they tried to do is raise the base rates for the drivers as well. But in the office, I've seen two that I've been introduced to, so. But it's all your driver's wages included in the budget as well, of course.
Mayor, the Southampton Medical Facility, there is no change to our proposed budget. For Council's information, we're currently in negotiations with the physicians in that group to renew the contract and hope to bring something new to Council in the coming months. Port Elgin, Dr. Earl Medical Facility, it's the same thing, Mr. Mayor, very similar budget to last year. We continue to be very successful in doctor recruitment, which I believe is the next slide.
Thank you. Just a small question for clarification. It's a small dollar amount, but on the chart that is broken down, the very last line, 9301, indicates a transfer to reserve to a interesting numbers. What is that? It says transfer to reserve to 2019 Inc.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I'll look into it.
And just and maybe you don't know, but I'm just curious. The debt length on this one, we're still another 15 years on this debt?
I'm not sure, but it'll be in our financial statements. I know if you look at our financial statements, all our long-term debts categorized there. It may not directly relate to them. I believe it does. You can probably answer better than I can.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure exactly when that does end. As you said, it is.
Our doctor recruitment budget stays the same. We've been very successful as this is a cooperative arrangement with Kincardine. Kincardine and the town are the primary contributors to the ongoing doctor recruitment. We're supported with Bruce Power, and it's been very successful over the year.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Just a quick comment about physician recruitment. I just wanted to commend our physician recruitment coordinator, Peggy, and she's doing a wonderful job. And I do receive calls from time to time. I'm on the physician recruitment team, of course, and the number of orphan patients over the years has dropped considerably, and to the point where the last number I received, it's probably less than 350 patients on the orphan patient list, and that soon will be, from what I'm hearing, will be disappearing. So. Again, I've said it at council meetings before for the general public with the media in attendance. If you're still without a family doctor, call the 1-800 number. I haven't got it right in front of me here today, but Healthcare Connect, and and get on the orphan patient list, and if you don't have a family doctor, and hopefully you get fixed up, because the number is really coming down substantially. So it's a good news story. We're blessed here in our community with the state that we're in for individuals that have family doctors. So we're really good shape.
Thank you. So I think at this time we'll take a 10-minute break. So we'll reconvene at 10:30 to move to fire, emergency preparedness, and health and safety. Well, let's resume here, and I guess we'll move down to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Fire Department Health and Safety and Emergency Preparedness, and our chief is going to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll review the 3 service areas. There's minimal changes. In fire, you'll notice the biggest focus is on the volunteer firefighters. In 2018, we hope for a real emphasis on firefighter wellness. That's emotional wellness, physical wellness, and environmental wellness for the firefighters, and that's one of the biggest increases there. There's also a grant request that we'll speak to later in the service enhancement areas. In emergency preparedness, it's a net zero budget thanks to our partners from Bruce Power. We have been working with a contract part-time CMC to review our plan, and we hope to bring an updated plan forward to council in 2018. In the health and safety budget, no significant changes there either. We are working with an outsider to look at our program. It's been a number of years since the town of Saugeen Shores went through a work well audit from WSIB, and we wanted an outside set of eyes just to make sure that we are on track with our program.
Go ahead. Okay. One question I raised, and I don't want to complicate things. The county is a Schedule 2 employer, and I wonder if it's ever worthwhile to make that comparison here as Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. I know the county is a much bigger financial entity and has a lot. You need a lot of human resources, people and staff to manage it, but it can be in some cases a savings for you. I know we considered it a number of years ago, but I would just mention it as something that at some point it's worth having a look at.
Absolutely, we can probably consider that in 2018 and do the financials.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I'm just curious, the fire department volunteer component. Everybody's always interested in when there might be opportunities to have a little recruitment go on. How are you looking in terms of the sort of just the breadth of experience and the potential for new hires in the future?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Council's aware our volunteer base has been incredibly stable. We haven't hired in over 11 years, which is just unheard of in the volunteer service. However, I know I said this last year, but I'll say it again this year. We hope to have some vacancies, some retirements, and do a recruitment in 2018.
Okay. Councilman Minot.
Was wanting to talk about the proposed grant to the Coast Guard Auxiliary. So is it now or is it at the back? It's at the back.
Yeah, at the back. So we'll
leave it.
We'll leave it. We'll deal with it then. Yeah, if you don't mind. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess this sort of covers all 3 of the areas that the chief is covering today, but it may. Well, I'll address it to the chief, but there's other staff involved, and that is the question of Narcan, naloxone, and our not only our ability to have it available. Not only I'm aware that the fire chief advised me yesterday that the firefighters already have it in their they can access it to use, which is great, and the police are imminently going to bring it on board and have use of it. But also, I think that there should be some of it in the municipal office available for municipal staff, frontline staff, or present here somewhere. That may already be the case. I don't know if we have it in this building or in this office. I guess my question is, do we have enough money in this budget? Accessing, I think, is probably for free or at very low cost, but there's also the training required for staff to be able to use it. Certainly the police service is going to be training its frontline officers and staff to make sure we use it correctly and that we follow our policies, and we have policies for using it. So do we have all the resources in this budget we need to make sure staff is able to use it, and receive necessary training, preparedness to make sure we have it where we need it?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, there, as we know, there is an opiate crisis, and Narcan is one step to combating it before hospital care. And our trucks have been equipped now for quite a while with it. Health Canada deregulated it so it can be supplied to anyone that may need it. So to answer Deputy Mayor Charbonneau's question, we could easily put it in more workplaces in Saugeen Shores with minimal cost. The kits are free of charge from the health unit, and I think we could the training component could be worked into our regular first aid training.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Through you to the chief. In the on the fire sheet, in the top category, which is revenues, pretty substantial actual over the 2017 budget in two lines: fire recoveries and fire marquee revenue. Could you maybe make a comment? I believe fire recoveries is related to perhaps MTO and other areas, but fire marquee, that's been a pretty good win-win for us since we brought them on board a couple of years ago. And certainly when I've been at meetings, when they've been there, they've been very, very, very positive about Saugeen Shores. So could you just comment on those two lines? Because they're substantially over what we had budgeted in those categories.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with many thanks to Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, she's carried some checks home for us from different conventions. And that is a recovery. We contract Fire Marquee to recover costs after a fire has occurred. And I will remind Council that this isn't a cost to the homeowner. This is a cost to the insurance company that represents that homeowner, and no costs are borne by the homeowner. That's a combination of MTO resources, and I believe there were some other rental fees in there.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine's more not a question, but a comment through you to the chief. And I saw a slide earlier that fire is 5% of our operating budget. And if you look, don't have to look too far east of Woonsound, we've got 25 full-time firefighters, and with a budget that's a whole lot larger than $798,000. And I just wanted to compliment you, Phil, and all the volunteer firefighters for, number one, bringing in a responsible budget, as is the police budget coming up. Very responsible budget this year, Chief, and your last one. But I just wanted to thank you, Phil, for, I think for the service we provide in a community this size, for 5% of our operating budget, is a very, very responsible operation, and you provide great service. So thank you to you and to all the volunteer firefighters.
Councillor Dave Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is with regards to the fire service. I know, Phil, a few years ago, the capabilities of the fire service were expanded to include this transfer capability for rural properties that don't have hydrants readily available, and I became aware of it. And when I brought it to the attention of my home insurance provider, I ended up realizing a fairly significant decrease in my home insurance just because of this service being provided. And I'm not sure that it's widely known amongst people that live in the rural part of our community that this service is available, A, and B, that you have to let your insurance provider know about it, because they don't just apply it based on the fact that it's available. You have to bring it to their attention. So the question is this transfer service with the pools, and for those that don't know, it's where they set up a reservoir on your property and then they transfer the water with a shuttle truck so that you can have a continuous spray in the case of a fire, a house fire, or a barn fire. Is this capability available all across Saugeen Shores, or is there a range that you can operate within?
Yeah, the Superior Tanker accreditation is a test that we do by an outside agency. They test to make sure we can flow water at the same rates in the rural area as if it was hydrant protected, and then those savings are applied, like you say, when the resident asks for them from their insurance company. And yes, the entire rural area of Saugeen Shores is protected by that.
All right, so that should be something that A is well known across the community, and B, known to people that they have to let their insurance company know that this is available. Is there some kind of proof that could be provided that from the fire department to say to people this is available and you should be realizing the savings to go along with it?
Yes, there's through you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a number of years since we promoted that, but I think Councillor Mayad is right. We could, again, concentrate on the rural residents and remind them that it's available to them. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. I guess we'll move on to police. And just before we start, I know this is your last budget, Dan, but and I noticed it because there's a lack of some little treat that you used to bring here every time. So I wonder if that's just saying goodbye, or anyways. I know this is your last budget, and we'll have lots of time to say something afterwards. But go ahead.
All right. And no, you don't have anything this time. It usually comes at the next budget meeting, and it still will come yet. Last year, I snuck in here before you guys met for our budget meeting, and I put an item in front of each of your name tags, and then somebody removed them all. So some of you got them, some of you didn't. But those who did can come and ask me, and I'll tell you what it meant. And those who didn't get it, probably have to talk with Councillor Huber. I think she hawked most of them. So anyways, you did get something last year, but you didn't get it maybe. This will be, I think, my 14th budget that I've presented to you. I presented in 2005. At that time, Mr. Mayor and Linda were still sitting probably about exactly where they are. You might have been over here. And then a couple of years later, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau and Vice Deputy Mayor Huber joined that crowd, I think. So I've delivered budgets to many different versions of council, and this council has been supportive along the way completely. I've also, we had a service board meeting last night, and I said the same thing to them. The Police Services Board has been supportive of me and of this police service, and they still hold us accountable, and they ask the hard questions, but as long as you do your job right, you can answer those questions. And this community has given myself and my wife Glenna really terrific opportunities, and we are moving away from here, unfortunately, but we're moving closer to our grandkids, which is our draw. So I thank you for everything you've done for us and for me and for our local police service. This year, you ended up with a 0% budget increase, and that's not. Actually, I was going to create a fake budget and show you, and I was going to make it like 19% for the new chief to try to ride out. But I didn't do that. So last year, if you recall, we had to increase our legal budget by $55,000 to cover a matter that didn't get done in 2017. So the board and I are asking that the surplus from our legal line item be carried into 2018 because we will be using it then. So for 2018, we returned our legal line item back down to where it has been for many years. We also had a constable who was at a first-class rate leave, and we hired a cadet, so and a fourth-class constable now. So both of those reductions in our budget are what offset our increase in our salary and our minimal increases for any of our small line items. So that brings it in at a 0% increase. So I'm quite willing to answer anything about it, but I'm open to any questions.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dan. Just to follow up on the Chief's comment about carrying over the legal line from 2017 to 2018, I would suggest the council should go a little further than that and do the same thing that we did, as you'll recall, a couple of years ago with the police services boards. We took police service board surpluses and rolled them into a legal reserve on an annual basis and built that up, which was a reserve that we have needed to tap already this year, which we're almost pretty well going to zero that reserve out this year due to some legals that we needed to deal with around recruiting the new chief and other things. So I think that was a valuable and smart thing to do, and I think that we would be wise to determine that we will take the legal line from the police service and roll it permanently, any surpluses in it permanently into a police legal reserve. Policing is a business where there's always going to be legal issues that the police service is going to be involved in, and it's really just the nature of what the police service does. It's going to require expenditures on legal every year, and often those expenditures are unexpected because things come up. So I think we would be smart to direct staff to roll that legal line every year into a permanent police legal reserve. I'd also like clarity, and clarity doesn't have to be offered today, but I would put to Treasury staff that how those legal dollars in those reserves can be released is an important question for the board. The board's view is that that money is board money, and that it should be released at the direction of the board without requiring resolutions by council. So I think some clarity on that point so that the board knows how that moves forward or how that should be done would be good. The question I had for the chief, you'll know that in this budget there's a request from the building department to take the bylaw enforcement officer from part-time to full-time, and I just was interested to know to what extent today, broadly speaking, is the police service involved in enforcing the bylaws of the municipality now that we have the bylaw enforcement officer at the level that he is working at now? Are police officers involved much in bylaw enforcement at this point, or not very much, or just some general comments would be appreciated.
Yeah, policing is required to be looking after bylaws, so we deal with a lot of parking complaints. We do deal with barking dogs, noise complaints, the noise bylaw. So if there is something, if we're aware that the bylaw officer is working and there's a type of a noise complaint or a dog on the beach call that person can handle, then we pass that off to the bylaw enforcement officer. Sometimes they're busy doing other things like property standards, so we'll do that call if we're not busy. But I think it's far more efficient use of dollars to have someone at the salary level of a bylaw enforcement officer going to dogs on the beach than a police officer.
I agree with that statement, Mr. Mayor, and that's why I would say that if we are going to consider increasing the bylaw enforcement officer from part-time to full-time, then we should have some assurance that what you just said is what's going to happen, that police officers will be responding to fewer bylaw enforcement complaints or not responding to them at all. Because you'll note, and everyone around this table and in this room will know, there's been a significant number in the last number of months of significant criminal investigations being undertaken by the police service. These criminal investigations take a great deal of time and resources from police officers who cost a fair bit of money each to do their work, and they need to be there to do that work and not chasing dogs around the beach with yellow notebooks. So I think that should be the quid pro quo on bylaw enforcement, is that one way or the other, and it's an important thing, the chief was generous not to mention it, we're going to need our police officers to have more time in future. We're going to need more feet on the ground one way or the other doing those big investigations, because the community is growing at a rapid rate, and the faster the community grows, the more it grows, the more crime there is. You can only skin that cat so many different ways, and you either have more police officers, or you have the police officers that you give them more time to do those things you need them to do, which is investigate crime. And one way we could do that is take some bylaw enforcement off their shoulders, and maybe that's what we can achieve through the proposal being put forward by staff on building. But I think we need to do it, and we should lay those expectations down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I think the CAO would like to comment.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Deputy Mayor, and I'm certainly willing to work with our new police chief coming in to fully understand what the actual investment from police services is into bylaw. The proposal, as you know, for the bylaw enforcement officer is an increase of 3 hours a week, And if police are currently investing 20 hours a week or 50 hours a week or 1 hour a week, I don't want to trade that for 3 hours a week. So we want to make sure that it's a thoughtful transition. I agree 100%, as do our staff, that bylaw enforcement is most effectively done by bylaw officers, but I wouldn't want to be in a position where the council's expectations is we're adding 3 hours to someone's work week, and that's expected to fill in for something the police may be investing in, and I have no idea whether it's 1 hour or 100 hours a week. So I'll work with the new chief, and we can report back to council.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. And let the record show that that's one of the very few times that the Deputy Mayor has ever suggested creating a reserve. So, you're usually going in the other direction. I did, yeah, you love reserves. I did want to ask you about, we've had a couple of years now where the whole court thing changed around and the jail thing changed around. And I noticed that, the court case management numbers are, a little bit different, the actuals, than what we budgeted for. Do you have any comments about how, has it been 3 years now since all that sort of happened?
It's been about 3 years since
jails closed.
Jails changed, the jail closed. It's been 4 years, I think, since Owen Sound did, actually. But
so, how has it all sort of settled down in terms of what it requires from us?
For us as a community, the loss of the jails and the longer transport that we may have to do, OPP Transport does do them at free of charge because that's part of what their mandate is. I think we are better off now than we were before. Some of the changes when it comes to court case management in our budget occurred this year, just isn't reflective in our budget this year because it happened in about January, February. But that's not court security. They are responsible for court security. So anybody who has a court within their jurisdiction, Chief Belay in Stratford has a court within Stratford. They're responsible for court security within that. So all the other police services around come, they'll dump their prisoners and they'll leave. So it is having that within your community brings a lot of positive to your community, and it brings a lot of extra income and other spin-offs, but it has its problems as well. Bottom line for your question is we're better off now than we were before, even though it's not better off for the people that are, and they're people too. They go to Penetanguishene now, and so your family to come and visit you drives to Penetanguishene. When they get released from jail, they're released in Penetanguishene. Not here, not one. Tougher on them.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Mayor, there's one thing I forgot to add to. Last night, the Police Services Board approved the changes to the fees and charges numbers for the police service and did implement the 2% increase that was implemented across the rest of the town. So that's where the fees and charges for the police service currently stand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, I guess you're off the hook.
Good.
Your last budget. Thanks very much for everything, Dan. And like I say, we'll get an opportunity, I know, later to convey our thanks to you in a little more informal setting, and I look forward to that night.
Good, thanks.
So, I think our next then is Development Services, and we'll begin with thanks both chiefs.
Good morning, thank you. Good morning, thank you. I'm here to present the Development Services, which consists of Building Services, Bylaw Enforcement, Planning, and the Conservation Authority. This year we had lots of updates. I'm not going to go through them all because I know you guys can read. But I do want to make an addendum here that there weren't 13 site plan approvals. There was 3, one being residential and 2 being non-residential. We did create 133 residential units.
through the planning process. Achievements on building, we're on track to issue about 400 permits this year. Out of those 400, we have 150 to 200 permits for new dwelling units. We've been conducting a customer service survey for all year. You'll get the results of that in the new year when we do our year-end report to council, which we suspect this year will be substantially different than you received in past years because we'll be a lot more detailed. We're excited to get that to you in the new year. That said, this year has been in building an exceptional year. We met our budget requirements in September, and now we're putting money into reserve. The bylaw and other, we've done chickens bylaw earlier this year. We removed several pylon signs. We did the sign up bylaw update, BizPal, and many other exciting things. Our goals for 2018 are to building service staff compensation report, which will come out in the new year, and we're working on service process communication strategies, which is ongoing. We'd have a much better handle on it at the end of this year, early next year. Challenges?
Just hang on a second here, Councillor Minaj. Go. Thank you. Go ahead, Bart.
Challenges, with the high volume of construction activity, there has been a strain on staff. With one staff leaving, we've just recently rehired to replace that individual. But we've managed to issue permits in a timely and efficient manner. We expect 2018, with more lands becoming available, more of the same. We also expect several large projects. Bylaw activity has continued to increase with the growth in activity in the community. More residents means that we're getting more and more calls on bylaw, and we'll have a report for you on that again at the end of the year when we have all the final numbers, similar to what we had last year.
Councillor Minaj, oh, sorry, you still going?
Nope. Moving on to.
I have a question on what was presented, Neil. Okay, we'll get to it. Okay. We'll get it out of you yet.
I could ask the first question then before. How many people took advantage of the chicken bylaw? How many people are registered in the community?
We have one individual who took advantage and was ecstatic to do so, and we were ecstatic to help her through that process. And it's been for that individual a real boon. I suspect that in future years that we hopefully get more activity in there, but it's a start in the right direction.
Okay, go ahead, Bart.
Building services, the increase reflects an actual nets to zero because revenue from the building department goes back into reserve for the lean years. So my first 5 years, almost 5 years here now, the first 3 years we actually took money out of the reserve. Last year we actually added money to it, and this year we suspect that we're going to add an additional funds to that reserve. So that is a good news story. Bylaw enforcement, we have asked the permanent part-time 32 hours be made into a full-time position at 35 hours a week. We feel that that's warranted because of good operational practices, as our CAO has stated. But furthermore, that the job tasks have come to the point where we actually have to fill. There's so much work out there for them to do that we need to actually have them there for 35 hours.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you. So the second of three questions is appropriate now. So listening to Deputy Mayor Luc Charbonneau and Dan talk about, our police chief talk about bylaw enforcement and listening to what was said, I think I'm getting the message that maybe what you said was, David, was that it may be a 30 or 60 hour thing being driven into maybe a 3-hour window, and I would like to hear that we get on top of this as soon as we can. So, what is your expectation on being able to bring back a report that might actually say we need 2 full-time bylaw enforcement officers? When could we expect to get a good handle on that information?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if council agrees to the request a little bit later that moves this position from 32 to 35, that gives us some more flexibility, and Bart and I and our bylaw officer can review how we implement that. I'd like the new chief to get settled in for a period of time. I'm sure he's got lots of priorities. In reality, it'll probably be mid-next year.
Councillor Dave Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the Director of Building Services. Does that, along the lines of the bylaw enforcement, does the increase in the hours, does that cover a dispatch capability, or how does the building or the bylaw enforcement officer get dispatched?
Normally doesn't get, he carries a radio with him, but he normally doesn't get dispatched. He normally gets phone calls and left messages on his phone. That's how he gets 90% of his contacts, where people are making actual complaints to him, and he directly goes through that process.
A resident phones into the town and gets directed to his phone line.
Yep.
Either talks to him or leave a message.
Exactly.
And he looks into it. Okay.
Councillor Mike Maya.
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor, through you to Bart. 400 building permits in 2017, you stated in your slide. How does that compare to 2016 number of permits?
2016, we did about 340, roughly. The year before, we did about 290. The year before that, we did about 280. So we've been on this fairly, gradual, I'd say rapid increase. So we've actually, in the last 3 years, probably doubled, 25% greater than what we did so long ago.
I think monthly on your website that you update those numbers. Are you aware for a while where the building stats were there? Was there a spreadsheet on the website where you updated those numbers?
I don't think we have a sheet on the website for that, but we can look into that option.
Okay. Sure.
Planning, we have 2 service level increases, one being development group form and the update to the official plan.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you then, Bart, I saw line item 5420 says planning consultant planning policy updates. So I could assume that might be the official plan that you're talking about there, the update to the official plan. Can we get some kind of timeline on the component parts, the major component parts of the official plan, or will that come as a separate report to council in the new year?
That would come as a separate report to council at a later date.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just how much money have you allocated to the OP update? Is it 10,000? And so how extensive an update does that pay for? I mean, what exactly, just in broad terms, what are we talking about funding with that in terms of a process?
I think we're looking at just the start of that process, because I think it'll start in 2018 and carry on to 2019. That's a fairly large project. It'll take some time.
Councillor Dave Maya.
One more question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Director, Bart, how many of the 400 new builds in Saugeen Shores would you say fall into the category of the average household cost of $284,000 and pay $2,475 in taxes?
I would say very few.
There's kind of a disconnect there, because that's an assessed value that MPAC puts on the average house here. So, and it's not.
You have to look at the building being more expensive because of its age. for a single-family dwelling than an existing house. All right. So,
Sorry for interrupting you.
that's okay.
There's a combination of not, there's some apartments, so it's average home, the average that MPAC will get you per household.
Right.
So it's you will have some that are probably around that range, but the market value and MPAC's assessment is often not exactly the same number.
Yeah.
So I mean, a good question I can say to you, you probably know your assessed value. Would you sell your house for that? And 9 times out of 10 people will say no.
Correct. All right.
Councillor Mike Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just more of a strategic question and maybe a discussion for another day when it comes to planning. We had a planning advisory committee meeting last night, and lots of good contribution from planners from Bruce County. And we have our own planning coordinator full-time with benefits, and we do pay significant dollars to the county for planning services. We are a growing community, projected to go to 18,000 by 2027, 28, I think it is. Has management team, at what point do we as a council talk about planning services in terms of having our own planning office? Yes, we have a planning coordinator, Jay Posner, heard from last night. Planning's doing a great job for us internally, but we do pay significant dollars to the county for planning, as I mentioned. And at what point do we, or has senior management, maybe through you to the CAO, has there been any discussion at a senior management level, David, in terms of our planning services? And does it make any sense for us at some point to consider having planning under the full umbrella, complete umbrella of the municipality? I know it gets pretty complicated, probably at provincial level, county level, but has there been any discussion about that at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is something that is on our radar, I would say, as a distant goal. It's not something that we're actively pursuing. We're generally satisfied with the level of service we get from the county, but it is something that some days we go, yep, this might be something we should consider doing internally. What I'd like to recommend, if that's a conversation you would like to advance, is we should get direction from council probably after the next election. That would be good timing as council sets the priorities over time, and staff can report and the county can report on perspective.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
2 follow-ups. I'm interested to know, because it's just not obvious to me. Councillor Myatt just suggested that we're paying for Bruce County planning assistance. I know that certainly when applications come in, there's fees that go to the county, but are we paying a fee on top of that? Because it's maybe I'm just missing it on the list here. Do we contribute something to Bruce County planning directly from?
No, only through our general levy. So it's a general levy.
So it would be the general levy that people here pay to the county.
That's correct.
So the fees that people pay for planning applications that go to the county, does any of that come back to us?
We have a fee also that is included in that on our fees and schedules by law. It's much smaller than the county. The county has a big expense of the circulation. They circulate so they maintain that database where they circulate every home for each application. And so there's a cost with that. There's a cost with advertising for meetings. There's also a cost for defending. So there's a range of services that they provide through that.
Okay. My second sort of follow-up question was Councillor Myatt. Dave, he asked a question about the average house prices and how it fit into the building permits. Just to take that one step further, do we, because the point I think he was kind of getting at that I think most of us sort of have a sense of is that we certainly aren't providing very many opportunities for what generally is referred to as affordable housing in this community. And I'm just curious, where would it fit into our budget to even consider any kind of incentives or encouragement or something that at least attempts to recognize that there definitely is an opportunity for building in a certain of a certain size, a certain category towards a certain demographic that approaches affordable housing, or should that just be relegated to the county too?
Well, I think in the past we've done a number of things here in Saugeen Shores to help address that by donating land, by participating in that Wellington Shores effort. But there is a range of things. I mean, if you're first of all, the county has over 700 social housing units throughout the county, a number of them. You don't see them all the time because they're scattered all over, but they have 700. They also have gone through a pretty extensive consultation period and developed a 10-year plan to try and address and have set some targets that they have consistently met to try and address those wait lists. They are huge, I agree with you, and they are in Saugeen Shores. Most generally, they're in the shoreline communities where people want to live, and there's affordability is an issue. So, but I would be kind of not really supportive if they were trying to duplicate what the county's efforts are. I think collectively there's things we can do, some things here if we wish to, and I think Bart, you can. I know you're anxious to talk here, so I'll quit here in a second. But there is some things that we could do on a general basis. But I think if we got specifically into trying to address those issues that the county have the expertise and do at, it would be counterproductive because they're much better at it and better resourced than we are.
First part of the question I can kind of answer is that last year we issued a permit for a 55-unit apartment building, and the greatest growth that we've had is semis, which are much more economical than say a single-family dwelling. Single-family dwellings usually start in around the $400,000 range, and we've issued many that are in the $1 million range, but the vast greatest growth of the 150 to 200 family dwellings that we've created this year will be in semis, which is in the range of less than $400,000. And again, we hope to build next year another apartment building of 50 plus units. So there is a broad spectrum of a housing that's coming online to everybody.
Add to that too, I think the federal government has recognized that I think they're suggesting that they have a huge fund to try and in the $2 billion range that they're trying to implement to address affordable housing across the country. Vice Stephanie Huber.
Two follow-ups. The apartment building permit that you're mentioning, is it the one that's it's pretty much built now?
Yes.
And yes was the answer.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, it's advertised as luxury apartments, so it doesn't really fit into the affordable housing category. I'm just curious, this developers forum that's talked about, does that give us a chance to basically sell opportunities? Like, it's because certainly, you just said that there's a lot more semis being built, but there's also this incredible demographic here, which is the older people who are looking for different styles of housing. I would just suggest that, when that forum, because I'd like to hope that it sticks in the budget, that, we should try and encourage some creative approaches to building, because we certainly don't always need $400,000 houses to be built. It would be nice to have different styles of accommodation, and for example, in Durham, just down the road, there's a communal house that senior women sort of live together with their own units, but they share some facilities. We don't have any of that going on here, so I would just suggest that maybe that would be a good thing to kind of work into a forum. Like, hey, there's opportunities here. Think a little differently about what you might build. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that is a topic that we could discuss during the official plan amendment of what we can do here. But I think it's always. I mean, if it would be wise to take the opportunity to participate in what the county does also, because they've got a much bigger budget and they reach out often. In fact, there's a number of teams around NIMBY teams, and there's people in this town that have been very great advocates of social housing, affordable housing, affordable luxury housing. I'll say that. Go on, right?
And finally, the Conservation Authority, which is the same budget or very similar budget to last year.
Just one, there's Conservation Authority there. It's the budget. We've already seen it, so I don't think there's any further questions on it. Then we'll move on. Thank you very much, Bart.
Thank you.
No further questions, and I think we'll move on to our Director of Public Works, Amanda, for
Good morning, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to present to you Engineering and Public Works. So our services include project management, GIS, asset management, day-to-day operations of road maintenance, winter control, those things, the water, wastewater services, stormwater, and waste management, including garbage collection and landfill. We work with the fleet, maintaining that, and we run the cemeteries. So our achievements are long. I said engineers don't speak in many words and like to use bullets, but I proved myself wrong and had a great number of slides of the wonderful things that we've done this year. We did a lot of catch up on the 2016 projects and fulfilled almost all of our desires for 2017. And we did that through a group of hardworking, dedicated individuals. Mostly I'm speaking about the ones that are unionized members out in the field, and I also want special mention of the Aqua operators that work very hard along with our guys to get the things done, including the almost 9 kilometers of rural roads, the 1,500 locate requests, and the 400 municipal consents that were done this year. Those numbers are just astounding. There's one person that did 1,500. Continuing on our achievements, we have more material going to the landfill, and that's been accommodated. Constructed a new outfall for the wastewater treatment plant. We had 21 special events this year, and that goes to your request to document those things. 667 service requests through CityWorks with an 83% closure rate. The new CityWorks is working well. It's a great tool to go from the office to the field to get things done, and it is complementing the GIS. Our contract has been negotiated with our union staff for the next.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question about the accommodated and increase in material deposit at the landfill. And I think later there's another budget that says that the last 2 years we scooped as many trees off the beaches as we could, and we took them to the landfill. I remember having that discussion saying, surely to goodness we're not burying trees at the landfill. We must have a different answer to that. So can you explain the increase in material? Because I thought at one point we were discussing that the amount going into the landfill, the tipping fees were on a losing side of the ledger, not an advanced side of the ledger. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
So what's we're seeing coming into the landfill is a lot of building debris. So there's a lot of cottages that are being remodeled significantly, and that's a big increase to the landfill. We did see in 2016 the beach lumber come down. It's currently stored, for better terms, on the landfill right now. We can't put it through the grinder because of the sand that's in it. So we're trying to come up with a plan on what to do with that beach debris at the moment.
Is there no opportunity, or is there an opportunity then, where we could invite requests for people to access the site, cut it up into manageable pieces for firewood? Is it suitable for firewood? Could we actually make a small amount of money by allowing people to take that and use it where they could use it?
Mr. Tendering the purchase of the firewood is something that we are looking at. The complexity comes in with the beach sand that's in it. So it would have to be someone that could handle taking the material and cutting it without ruining their tools because of the amount of sand. So it wouldn't be homeowners buying a 4-foot diameter tree trunk, taking it home and cutting it up for firewood. With the CityWorks mobile on the break, I asked, and it's between 5,000 and 8,000 a year to have the mobile service request module so that you could put it in from your phone. And when we first looked at the CityWorks, it was 3 repeat users on the website, so we didn't think the 5,000 to 8,000 budget item was appropriate for the level of use that we've been seeing on it. But it is something that we can revisit again if you want before January.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that, first and foremost. And I just say that I don't really use CityWorks because I don't have. It's hard for me to interface with it just when I want to interface with it, right? Because I'm always sitting on a tractor and not usually sitting in front of a computer. And so I think that that's a pretty reasonable amount of money. I think 5,000 to 8,000. And the CIO was mentioning the potential for public access and things like that, or broader access. If we can create more access to that site, I think to that program, it's better, easier access. That's going to make the information come to you and make you more efficient, I think, and make us all more efficient in that. So I really would like it to be something you consider when you return for council to decide whether it thinks that's a worthwhile investment or not. I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Continuing with our 2018 goals, so we're going to continue investigating the sanitary sewer through video inspections. We met with Kitchener this year. They're on a 17-year cycle, so their sanitary sewers get reviewed every 17, like that each segment gets reviewed every 17 years. We're trying to be a little more aggressive at this point than 17 so that we know where we're at through the town. We're working on deciding to do our reconstruction plan based on the asset management and condition ratings combined with development works and potential development areas. So that would mean making sure that the infrastructure is where it needs to be as we see it either based on condition or based on growth. Bridge maintenance is a priority of ours, and we want to ensure we're replacing the critical infrastructure, which would include transmission, water mains, water tower. We're working on a level of service protocol, enhancing our asset management with a 10 to 25-year capital road program. We're increasing public consultation by implementing a protocol, and we would like to collaborate with development services to provide timely reviews, comments, and approvals. Our challenges, meter readings are continue to be done by foot in Southampton versus the remote readers that were installed in Port Elgin. We have an aging fleet and increased responsibility for trolley maintenance, which requires more time, financial contributions for parts and materials. All of our services on the ground are increasing because of the development, so there's more road to maintain, more sidewalks to plow, that sort of work. We've also seen unpredictability of weather this summer. Winter control is one piece where we're not sure. It's snowing already. What's going to happen with climate control or climate change? And construction scheduling this year was really affected by the amount of rain that we had.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you. So I'm not fully understanding the aging fleet comment, because I thought an asset management plan and a fleet, let's say a fleet of 50 vehicles and 5 vehicles is turned over every 10 years. So the aging fleet shouldn't be an aging fleet. It should be an always changing fleet that is the same. The same number of older pieces should be being replaced with newer pieces. Can you further explain that to me? Thank you.
We have the fleet plan, and we do get new pieces on, but there are older parts and older equipment that are in there that are close to the end of its life right now. So we had to do a lot of work on an excavator last year for engine replacement to get it to the point of where we thought it was going to be replaced. So there's things like that. The trolley cost about $17,000 in parts this year. There are new coming on for sure, and from our mechanics they're saying there's more and more pieces that haven't been retired that are older that are being maintained. So maybe we're just in that lull of the fleet lifespan at the moment. Fleet is something that we intend to work heavily on getting a better understanding on in 2018. I know that.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you. That was a perfect segue into fleet management. So my understanding is that at some point we should have a mature asset management fleet component and we should never really worry about it. What you could do is you could advance things by saying they're not built as well as they used to be, so our 7-year turnover should be a 6-year turnover or something like that. But at some point, I would hope that we as a municipality fleet will be an automatic computer-generated program that'll just say these 3 vehicles have to be replaced this year, and that's the end of it. So when do you think we would be at that mature state? How many more years is it going to take to get us there?
Sorry to jump in on there, but a fleet is a corporate responsibility and heavily centric in public works and engineering, but also in other departments as well. So during our capital budget submission, the council will see in December we're taking a little bit of a different approach to fleet management. I'm not going to go into detail on that, except to say that a senior management team have identified fleet as a critical priority in 2018. And I know we've got a couple of requests. When will we do something? Do something. The senior management team have identified that fleet will be probably our second highest priority in 2018. So we expect to come back to council, I would say late first quarter, maybe early second quarter on a complete fleet strategy. And Councillor Minaj, you're quite right. Fleet should be straightforward. It should be programmable. It should be predictable. It should be. We should be able to track the lifespan of an individual vehicle from the day we buy it and know its entire life until the day it's taken out. And that'll be with different roles in our organization. So high priority for us, big investment, very worthy of senior staff's attention early in the year.
Deputy Mayor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to follow up on the CAO's comment there, would you and the senior staff make sure when you're doing that fleet work in the very near future to include police services in that work? And because there's a lot of transfer back and forth actually of fleet between the municipality and police services, and I think police should be in our fleet management plan. Yeah,
through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely 100%. We've started that dialogue already, and we see that a seamless, hopefully a seamless transition of police vehicles into the corporate inventory as well.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are you finished with your slides? I had a couple of questions. They related to the sheets that are marked service area, roads, and roadside maintenance. That's page 80 in our package.
I think you're going to do that next, are you? Sure. She's going to go to the tally sheets next if you want.
Okay. Well,
are you done with this then, Amanda? The presentation? Okay. So I guess go ahead then. I guess. So. Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, may I go through them starting with engineering that way, or?
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to start with all of them. I engineered them, and I apologize for that. So you'll see big swings and changes in numbers, but I needed to understand what my predecessors had done before and then put it into a way that I understood it and could explain it. So that's why you see there's big numbers. They all balance out. They just, from page to page, the salaries and benefits change so that I could divvy them out through my buckets accordingly for my benefits. So that's an engineering trait that I must apologize for, but I can't be anything else. I am what I am, yeah. So
didn't expect anything else.
I once gave David a report that had my dollar figure to the third decimal place. So the highlights for engineering, the risk management for FCM funding and the transportation master plan from development charges. So they're a revenue and an expense. The revenue coming from the reserves, the expense coming out. And then the salaries were reallocated through my engineering brain to have the people set in one spot instead of having the director's salary cut into 3 pieces, those sort of things. So they are now shared, which changes the FTE to 6. And the GIS is now fully funded through the engineering budget. It's a corporate service, but it's fully in engineering, whereas last year it had a transfer for community services. If you want me to stop at each of these, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep going through the highlights of them.
Mike Myatt.
Last year, at this table, we did fund a second GIS coordinator position, and I'm just wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, to Amanda, what percentage of our GIS mapping, logging, what percentage of it has now been completed, and is that service been extended over to Community Service Department? And if so, what percentage of the mapping, logging is complete within Community Services?
Mr. Mayor, do you mean the asset management part? The facilities pieces like the doors, windows, all that?
The facility pieces.
That's all complete
It's
now.
all complete.
Yep, so the inventory is completely there. What is left to do is the value of replacement for some of those pieces. That's true in both Public Works and Community Services, that we don't have that 100%.
So things like, for example, playgrounds and swing sets and garbage containers and benches, and that's all those pieces have been logged through Community Services now?
Absolutely. Yep, they're in there. We know every wooden swing. We just don't know how much it's going to cost to replace necessarily that swing. So, Public Works Administration, again, the only change here is the reallocation of staffing through the pieces. So this is the one where you see the reduction that offsets the increases in the other areas.
Councilor Minot.
So respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I would ask that David exercise some control over the engineering of these budget sheets and have the engineers speak with Christy and Susan about some consistency and changes. In particular, if you look at Public Works Administration, we get the 1,000 line item is a full-time salary, the 1,100 is part-time wages, and 1,200 is overtime, and it moves. So this particular one in Public Works Administration gets into some detail that I'm not even sure. I guess it has to be there at some point, but we're into 1480, and then the 16, 10, 20, 30, 40 are all vacation pay, stat holiday pay, sick time, and bereavement leave. And then it goes lower into the 2000s, and we get benefits and retirement benefits, 2010. And if we go to 4830, we get training and memberships, and then we get 4840 as admin training. My point is that it only shows up, as far as I can see, in Public Works Administration. And I think that I think it's a good thing to show it. Sometimes I wonder about sick time, showing sick time, but it's something that is able to be flagged for if it's the only time we get to see it, or whether it should be that sort of thing should be a confidential allocation number that is in a different report at a different time. But what I like about it is that it gives more reflection on what's going on. And so I would ask that the finance department speaks to the engineering department and the community services department and so on, and gives us those same number line items in the administration worlds and in the engineering. The engineering sheet doesn't have that. It has full-time wages. There's $500,000 in full-time wages, but it doesn't break out all of the rest of that. So I'm asking that we overview that, and maybe we can get that breakout in the future, or maybe it's not appropriate to have all that breakout, but some answer can be given in the future.
Yeah, I think we can take that under consideration, sure. And perhaps Finance or HR could give us a report at some time during the year about those numbers about sick. And I guess you're talking about sick leave, holiday pay, and vacation pay specifically, so that we know. Sure. I think that would probably not be all that difficult. She's not in her head. Okay. Just. Yeah. That's all right. Sure. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
In this category, there's, and it's not a large amount of money, but there's a line, 5310 3150. It says vacuum truck rental, and my little joke person would say, "Oh, that must be something that really sucks." But that was a joke. I'm just curious. Do we have opportunities to, because we have some big equipment, and we don't always need it. Do we have much opportunity to literally rent our stuff out or have it go out to be used? Is this a potential growth area for revenue, do you think? It points out vacuum truck. I'm assuming we might have some other pieces of equipment. With all this work that's going to be going on here, is there any opportunity for us to literally do some contracting of our equipment for service?
For you, Mr. Mayor, the vac truck rental came out of a demand from the area because the ability to get a vac truck nearby is very difficult. So we do use it every so often for other people for private services, so it has less disruption. The vac truck was very busy this summer, so much that we couldn't actually get to some of the things that we wanted to do, not just because of rentals, because of our capital projects and that sort of stuff. I don't see us renting out our equipment because we need it in the hours to get it done. We don't have extra laborers, operators, or machine time available to do that.
Councilor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That prompted a thought that I had noted, but I didn't speak to it, and that was a similar thought that we were at the GIS session last week, and it was well received, and there are only 3 communities in Bruce County that currently employ full-time GIS staff, and some of the other communities are finding it hard to invest in that kind of a service. So I wondered if there were opportunities, partnership opportunities, service level agreement opportunities for our GIS department to offer services to South Bruce, something along South Bruce Peninsula, something along those lines, and whether or not we could think about that in the future as a revenue generator that could maybe take a half-time staff to a full-time staff, and we can actually not make it revenue neutral, but actually gain some money for the municipality. And I realize that's running a business, but maybe that's what I'm asking.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to build on that, and that's an excellent idea. Not specifically, I can't comment on GIS, but just generally. I had a recent meeting with the CAO in Kincardine. I've spoken with the CAO of the county. I had a meeting this morning, actually, before budget, a conversation about shared services, how our neighboring partners can work together to provide services more cost effectively or to support each other. I formerly worked in Waterloo. We had 173 shared services with the City of Kitchener. That we would hire one staff person together, and they would do the same job for both municipalities, but not reinventing the wheel. So it is something that is on our radar, and we intend to explore further.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, or Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, did you have more on roads and min before I go on?
Thank you. I just had sort of two lines of questioning. One is just would like a comment. There's a line in this budget. It's on the second page. It's line 4700. It says environmental initiatives, and you might recall we had a rather lengthy conversation over coffee once about some environmental things we did a long time ago. If you could just make a comment about what fits into that category. I'm just curious, and then I have some additional questions about trees. So it's 6320 4700. It's page 81 of our package.
Yep, so that includes the environmental calendar and our contribution for the tree sale. Those are the two main pieces that come out of that. And with the tree sale, we contribute to help get the canopy. So a lot of times they're going in the front yard, so they help give us that green canopy in the roads, and that's we figure that's a great way to spend the money instead of planting more trees in the right-of-way and thickening it that way, because these are now maintained by the person that has purchased the tree.
Well, as a suggestion, one of the big successes when we did those 10 environmental initiatives, my first term of council, which was lots of years ago, one of the big successes in that was a rain barrel sale. And, it's certainly the amount of rain that we had this past summer. Most people who had a rain barrel probably were overflowing with water, but, it might be time to imagine doing rain barrels again, so I just would throw that in. I note on this this budget there's quite a few references related to trees, so I'll just point out a couple. There's a line, it's line 4322, which is about tree and vegetation control. I think this is the line that relates to our in-house stuff, and then when you jump down to 5922, it's about contract services, and I certainly saw lots of contractors out in the community doing some tree work. I'm going to assume that maybe the invoicing hasn't caught up with the actuals, because there's a pretty good disconnect there. And I think part of what I read somewhere was about we're shifting some of the contract stuff over to more in-house things. My question, though, really is related to this, the arborist, and I've had occasion to meet him a couple of times out and about. The arborist that we have works fundamentally within the public works world and not the community services world. We have some other things showing up in the budget related to trees in parks. I'm just curious to know what the interface is between you know, the arborist kind of ideas over two departments. I guess where I'm going with this is, you know, from a public works perspective, and I'm generalizing big time here, but I get the impression that the tree stuff is really about safety and security and all that kind of stuff, and that makes sense. The tree side, though, from the community services perspective and the parks perspective, I guess, and I appreciate you just used the word canopy. I like that, because it sort of comes in from a different direction about trees. So are we in fact being able to utilize more in-house resources? And is the invoicing going to catch up with the amount there for the contracted services? I suspect it would. And how is the arborist sort of shared with community services, or will the tree stuff that's showing up later in the budget sort of be distinct and separate and come in from a different direction? And maybe that's not a question for you, but I'll just, there's good stuff in here about trees, and I really appreciate that you're with us now, because I think you're kind of moving us along towards some better stuff with trees too, so thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the Public Works arborist is predominantly about roadside trees. He does a lot with the service requests. I would say 80% of our service requests are about trees. He and the Public Works supervisor go out and determine if the tree that's been requested is on public property or private. If it's on private, the Municipal Act allows us to maintain it or remove it if it's causing danger to our infrastructure. That is the only time he does work on private property. If it's in the municipal right-of-way, then he analyzes it as a safe or non-safe tree, sick or healthy. And a lot of his time has been working with ash lately because of the borer. When it comes to community services, it would be the same thing. If they need him out there to remove trees from parks that are seemingly unsafe, or they need someone to help if it's unhealthy, that's when our arborist comes out. With him coming on, we won't be seeing the $120,000 that we saw from contracted services from Hawkins and Fawcett. It's just not necessary. So we end up having them come out when they're close to the power lines, and that's about it now, because we aren't certified to work within the 5 meters to the power lines. So that decrease in the contracted services is offset by the increase in the materials and wages. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Mike Meyer. Turn your mic on and just refer to which page you're talking to, Mike.
Yep. Sorry about that. Page 80 of 157. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our Director of Public Works, talking about Snyder Road here, and I see under, well, there's two lines. 6320, 4335 is the maintenance, hard top maintenance. We budgeted $27,000 this year and have spent $15,000 the end of October. And then 6320, 5935 roads contract hardtop maintenance 140. It's up $70,000 from last year's budget. So I'm assuming that's for the additional 70,000 is for crack and seal work, et cetera, et cetera. But talking about Snyder Road, a bit of a roller coaster ride down there if you drive the road. And I was just wondering, Amanda, from a conditions rating standpoint, how would you consider the condition of Snyder Road? I think you drove that road, correct? What do you consider the rating to be on Snyder Road?
Mr. Mayor, Snyder Road is in the capital program because it's a one-time thing. I don't know the condition offhand, and I'm definitely not an expert.
So I brought up 3 years in a row now, Snyder Road, but I'm just wondering, from a hardtop maintenance perspective, the 27,000. Is there an opportunity if that road is not going to be reconstructed because we're waiting for sewer lines down the Golders Grove area? I think we've tried 2 or 3 times unsuccessfully for grants to place it, install sewer lines down there. But for Snyder Road, if there was repairs done to the hardtop, is that the budget? This 6320 4335 hardtop maintenance, is that done internally, that work? Then it's not a contract service. So staff do that their own maintenance from that standpoint. And in this Snyder Road, where there's lots of, I think it's probably the roughest road we have inside the in-town area. Not speaking about gravel, but hardtop. Is that something that you could take another look at in terms of just some maintenance repairs until we get to the capital budget, where we're talking about replacing the road entirely? So is there some work that could be done on Snyder Road from a maintenance perspective, fill in some of the potholes and so on and so forth? Can you take a look at that?
Go ahead, Amanda. I think she's mentioned you probably have it included in your capital budget, so that's the time to discuss it then, Mike.
Okay. I was just wondering, Mr. Mayor, I just think capital is total road replacement. I was just talking about getting to...
well, let's wait and see what she says in capital on what she's proposing. If you want to comment, go ahead, because...
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, these items, other than the crack and seal, are for potholes and patches and things that come up operationally through the year that we need to do. So it's not a planned, it's not like we're taking a block of a road and redoing it. Those will come in under capital.
Right, I understand, Amanda, and my question, I guess, is long-winded, I should have got right to it, but is there possibility of the potholes being repaired on Snyder Road? If you take a drive sometime, have a look at it?
I don't know in this budget, Mr. Mayor, if they're included on what roads are included in that, because like I said, this one's not a planned piece for that. Other than the service level increase for crack and seal, we have that. I don't know specifics of where this would be spent. We could come up with a budget. I'm not sure if we would recommend just filling the potholes on Snyder Road. I mean, maybe it would be an alternate to what we're proposing for capital.
Yeah, if it's a capital item, I think we can leave that discussion until the capital time. I think part of the, we're jumping way ahead here and jumping all over, and I think, Amanda, if you want to start, like, we've done public works administration, we're on road, so you're on road maintenance, okay? We're on road maintenance now.
So, yeah.
Councillor Dave Mayap.
While we're on road maintenance, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Switching from hardtop to loose top. Many of the residents that live on rural roads that are loose top maintenance have noticed a marked increase in the quality of the roads by the addition of this granular limestone gravel, which was an experiment a couple of years ago by the former director of Public Works on the River Road. So the River Road residents were quite ecstatic 2 years ago, and we've noticed this being applied to streets in Southampton like Louisa Street, and Concession 2 has had this applied as well, which certainly helps to keep the dust down, and it packs really nicely. Is this a part of a continuing program to upgrade all of the loose top surfaces to this type of, I'm going to call it lower maintenance, certainly low dust gravel? Because there's a couple of other streets, Norfolk and Alice, that are still got the old pit run or A gravel on them, which gets quite messy.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, loose top is actually a lot easier than hard top. So we have a cycle. So every so many years, that road will get redone with gravel. It's not based on condition. So Alice in Norfolk is actually on the 2018 list of streets to be done. I don't know specifically about the change to the gravel use, but I would assume that what we did this year will be the same as what we do next year. Pete hasn't said anything about it being a change from what they've been doing the last years, but I can get back to you and confirm that it's this new one.
Yeah, this definitely is the new gravel, which I refer to as the Cadillac gravel. I guess it's more expensive, and it comes in from one of the limestone pits up the peninsula, and certainly a higher quality gravel. It compacts really nicely.
Okay, so the next is winter control.
We had our first dose of this on Thursday, and it has, the only real change is that we do the salt sand every other year. So you can see that materials and supplies decreased because we're not purchasing sand in 2018 because we purchased it in 2017. We'll purchase it again in 2019. Traffic control will be next. The utilities include our traffic lights, crosswalk, and Coulter Parkette. So this update is based on actuals.
Councillor Madison.
Sorry, Amanda. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Amanda, do we have any more lights to be changed to the pedestrian activated? Any more streets that will be getting the pedestrian activated stoplights?
Mr. Mayor, do you mean replacing pedestrian crossings with the new ones?
Yes.
There's no intention on adding pedestrian crossings over the highway at this time.
Thank you.
Streetlights, the change is based on just utilities and growth because we've assumed some more roads. We have more lights that we're paying for.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I just need a comment about if it even fits in here. Do the downtown lights in Southampton, the pedestal heritage lights, are they considered street lights or are they in a different category?
Sir, they are street lights.
Okay. One of the motions that ran through the Heritage Committee last time is when we put up the very well received military banners, it became obvious that some of the poles in Southampton had suffered through missing parts and that sort of thing. Basically, you know, there's two poles that shoot out that anchor banners. Quite a few of the poles in downtown Southampton no longer have two of these anchors, and in fact, there's a couple that don't have any. So, would that, you know, I think there's some maintenance or materials categories in here. Could you just take that under advisement too? And the Heritage Committee is sending a request for consideration, but it would certainly, you know, enough years have passed that maybe they need something, some additional parts, or even just a paint job on them for maintenance purposes. Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
I would like to follow up on that comment, and my understanding is that some of our delivery van vehicles are responsible for some of the damage to these light post banner connections. I wondered if there's an opportunity to call them in and explain what they're doing, and if you haven't already, and make a move to ask them to comply with a different method of delivery or a different method of approaching the banner installations. Otherwise, we will be submitting bills to them for repairs.
For you, Mr. Mayor, if you can prove who hit it, then we would follow up with a claim, but we, at this time, don't have anybody coming admitting to doing it.
I can prove it. I'll send it in.
Wastewater, it's a zero, it's a user fee. We continued with the 6% rate increase that the Water Financial Plan had recommended. We are working on a financial plan for wastewater this year, and so it would be reviewed during that plan.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Just like some clarity, I just don't understand the one comment under wastewater, the 10th concession debt payments reduced. What occurred there? I wonder why were the payments reduced?
Through the payment schedule this year was a reduced now they're stepping down. So stormwater, again, it's the reallocation of salaries that I did to make it understood so that we have full people under stormwater instead of a non-applicable complement. For water, it's again a user pay, so it's a 5% increase through the water financial plan. The current year capital increases for the water tower project this year.
Councillor Minaj.
I'm sure there's a great explanation, but we've got capital in the sewer and water operating. Is that just for information, or is that the way we have to do it in these budgets? And so that's question A, and then question B is then, can you explain what part of the water tower project will be financed by this budget in 2018?
For you, Mr. Mayor, when you go through onto page 95, there are the transfers in and out of the reserve. So there's a water transfer to capital water and a water transfer to capital roads. Those are bringing water or money out of the reserve and into those capital projects. The roads one is for water main within roads, and the water is for the water main parts for things within the water plant. The 1 million for the capital on its own, that I just put there as information so that we recognize that that piece is coming, but it does come out of the capital budget. It will be a transfer out of reserves. You'll see that in the Mr. Mayor, no. Maybe I shouldn't have put that the water tower on here. I just didn't want to lose sight of that being in addition to the work that we're doing on the operating budget, that project was being done. The two capital transfers, I wanted to explain what they were. So transfer to capital water is for works within the water treatment plants, and that's 509,500. And then water transfer capital to roads is 658, and that's for water main pieces of road capital projects. So they're not related to the water tower. I just want to make sure that that was understood, that those two numbers don't add together coincidentally to give you the same number that we're using on the water tower.
It's just a transfer from the operational reserves to pay for the capital projects.
We'll see that in the capital budget. Yes. I apologize. I shouldn't have put in the water tower on this line. I didn't foresee it being a confusing piece, but there isn't in the operating budget $1 million for the water tower, but there is for other capital transfers. The water tower was supposed to be done in 2017, so you would have seen that in and out in the 2017 budget, I suspect. It will be done in 2018.
Pending the capital approval. Go ahead, Amanda. Keep going.
So garbage collection, this is the part-time garbage crew from community services. That's that salaries and benefits there. Revenue from bag tags and our contracted services with Basra.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe over the years there's been conversation about waste management being a break even kind of exercise, and that's certainly and I think coming up the next one is the landfill, and that's where the charge across all properties shows up. But it just seems that we're kind of headed in the other direction, that it seems to be costing taxpayers more when I believe we were trying to work towards it being a break-even kind of thing. Do you have any comments? And I've asked questions in the past about how the new contract situation with Bosra has been working out, and certainly I look forward to hopefully receiving a waste, and it fits into the waste management master plan, which is in here somewhere too, right? Because I'm just not sure that our idea with contracting out has been realized, that it was going to in fact be a cost savings, because I think we're still struggling with that. So will this all fit into the waste management master plan discussion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In 2016, the report to council showed that an annual budget for our own garbage crew was $305,000 a year. So the Basra contract is still less than if we were doing it in-house at $297,000. Garbage plus recycling plus landfill do come out to that zero with the waste management levy, which we'll discuss later and will be reviewed through that waste management plan.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you. And it's a good point, and important to note that it is revenue neutral this year, but it's something that we need to have on the radar going forward, that the waste management fixed fee is now at its max implementation. It's been fully implemented, and we've been rolling along now, and that implementation has been absorbing the increased costs as we go forward, right? And so as you head into the 2019 budget or the 2020 budget, or sometime in the next few years, you will come up against, once again, a crunch on revenues. And the administration and councils, not this council, because we're done, but councils going forward are going to have to be prepared to look at bag tags, because we have previous councils administered continuous increases to tipping fees, boosted tipping fees every year to make up for that. Then we implemented the fixed fee, and household collection is eventually going to have to move off that $2 mark, I think, in order to continue to recognize the inflationary pressure on garbage collection. I mean, the cost just goes up because of inflation. So that's something we need to state today, I think, and keep stating, that that's something that we're going to have to be prepared to consider in the future, and you can't always run away from it if you want to keep this off the tax levy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Dave Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And along the same lines of the fixed fee, first, where do I see it in the landfill budget here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is line 5450, 1600.
Oh, the very top. Okay, that's part of the general levy. Okay, so yes, we're up to $55, I think it is, per tax roll this year. Some time ago, I made a request that consideration be given to alleviating that fee for properties that don't have any residential garbage collected on them, and/or adjusting that level for farm properties that are paying a subsidized or a reduced rate on their property taxes. That this levy should be comparable in the reduced rate as well at 25%. Is any consideration given to that?
If I'll jump in here through you, Mr. Mayor. There were a couple of items that Council asked us to follow up as a part of the fees and rates strategy. So they actually are in our presentation. They were done, because of the timing, they were done after we've received your presentation. So if you can just hold your question later on, you'll see the responses to Tourist Camp, this item, and some reduction in recreation fees.
Are there any other questions on landfill before?
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Just for confirmation, it might be a typo. This is in the recycling. It's page 102 of 157. Line 6460.
Yeah, I think you're just jumping ahead a little here.
Oh.
Are you finished then with landfill, Amanda? Mm-hmm. Okay, then we will go to recycling. Have you got any comments to it?
No.
Okay, the question. And just name the page so we all know where you're talking about.
It's page 102.
Yep.
And
yep.
It's line 4950, recycling blue boxes bins. A little bit of a disconnect there between the budget for 2017 and the actual. Is this perhaps the purchase of blue boxes, or is it something else?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's a coding error. The 30,000 of that is supposed to be 4,900, which is the cardboard collection. This year, I coded them all to the same number instead of pulling out. I didn't notice a difference on the invoice of box versus bin, so those are cardboard boxes. They just have to be recoded.
Okay, anything else on recycling? Fleet then.
So fleet, I have nothing to present other than what's there. You can see that the trolley did cost quite a bit, and it had to get a whole new brake system, I think it was, installed this year, and the plan going forward is to change its brakes to be like dump trucks that can handle the frequent stopping better. Other than that, it's just normal work on our fleet.
Deputy Mayor Sherwood.
I just comprehend though because earlier when we saw a trolley in the promotions budget or whatever it was, that number came in at 15 and 5, and this is 17. I just get a reconciliation on was all of that 17 in that our 15, or this is in addition to, and maybe if it is, then can I get an idea of what we actually spent on the trolley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is additional to that, and we absorbed it into the parts, vehicle parts. So under 6330 4420, that budget, the actuals include the trolley work, and when we pull them line item by line item out, that 17 is an estimate. It's like 16 and change of what we spent on trolley parts and labor.
So I'm accurate to say then that the trolley expenses to the town in 2017 were $37,000. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
$32, I think, because the 5 is new for next year. That was going to replace the 17.
Okay, one last one is cemetery.
So the only change here is that I took our cemetery manager, instead of having him a 70-30 split, I just, for ease of accounting, put him as 100% here instead of the 30% under weed control.
If there's no questions, it's a great time to break for lunch. So I don't know, you want to take 40, come back at 1 o'clock, and you want to come back sooner than half an hour enough for 40 minutes? 1 o'clock.